All right. So, hello, my name is Nico Francis, and this is my presentation, A World Without. All right. So, there's a lot of talk about with this topic, and really, I've kind of condensed it down into these six major points, each with their own slides and whatnot. And so, here we go. So, thousands have lived without love, but not one can live without water. It is pretty much a known fact that water is a necessity. You can't go without it. You can go 2 weeks without food, but you can't go more than 2 days without water. It's one of Earth's most precious resources, and it deserves to be shared worldwide. So, just a little bit of background. Only 1.2% of the Earth's water supply is considered safe to drink. That's not really enough for the growing population of the world, currently approaching 8 billion. But the sad fact is that a lot of countries don't have access to fresh water, most having to walk up to 6 hours a day just to get to any available source of water, not necessarily clean. But the real question is, if we have the technology to help, why have it? So the necessity for water. Uh, Bathing, you might not think to be one of the most primary needs of water, but in these countries where hospitals and healthcare and ambulances are not present whatsoever, bathing and self-sanitization is the first line of defense versus bacteria, waterborne illness, etc. And without that, you're much at the mercy of the world. Perhaps the first thing y'all thought of is drinking water. Many villages, like I said, many villagers have to walk up to 6 hours a day, and that water is not clean. That water is contaminated with bacteria, it's contaminated with fecal matter from animals, whatever you may have. It's not good water, and drinking that as their only source of water really leads to not really good things. It just self sabotages themselves, but they have no other choice. Finally, as I stated before, you can go 2 weeks without food, but those are going to be a really, really bad 2 weeks. Nobody wants to go 2 weeks without food. So a necessary source of a necessary source of fresh water for irrigation is key to fostering the growth of your crops in order to actually eat said crops. Here is actually a graph, an infographic taken from the World Health Organization, kind of showing a few examples of how few or how little clean water supply some of these countries have. And as you can see, 3.4 million people die each year as a result of these waterborne illnesses. Now, this is what I refer to as the real issue. Of course, the real issue is the water crisis at hand, but the root cause of it is a complete and total lack of infrastructure for these countries. There are thousands of people, thousands of organizations and charities ready to help these people in need who don't have water, but they simply cannot get to them because there are no roads, anything to reach these people in need. For example, in South Sudan, during the rainy seasons, and in a lot of places with rainy seasons, there are no roads. They simply turn to mud, and there's really no easy way to get to them. And in addition, a lot of these countries who need the most water have the lowest GDPs, some nearing almost $310 per year total, which constantly adds to the problem. And it creates a cycle of people wanting water, people wanting to provide that water, but not being able to because of the lack of infrastructure. As I mentioned previously, however, there are lots of supporting organizations. Off the top of my head, there's the Water Project right here. There's water.org, Water for South Sudan, and plenty others, even smaller organizations you've probably heard of, ready to donate water to those in need. And the main goal of these actual organizations is to provide all the heavy equipment and tools needed to actually drill these wells, some of which need to actually go 300 plus feet into the ground to actually reach the aquifer. And without those tools, reaching that necessary source of water would be impossible for a lot of these impoverished people. So I present some engineering solutions. There's not really one that can completely wipe out the problem in one fell swoop, but when does that ever happen? So I've listed a couple examples of engineering solutions, and I'll go over them real fast. Mud pumps. Basically, all you need to know is that in the big drills that they use, they actually have tubes that go through the drill bit. Tubes that go through the drill bit and suck up the mud from the actual borehole so it doesn't clog it up. In addition to those, there are compressors that are not only used to bring out mud, but also to pump air through the drill bit to actually break up some of the rock. If you've ever heard of fracking, it's like a little bit like that, but on a much smaller and less destructive scale. Next, and this is actually more of a recent one, are the solar powered pumps. As the price of solar panel technology and more advanced technologies are on the decline as they become easier to produce, these allow for a constant source of electricity to provide a constant water pressure. And that is a big change because in the past, they've been regulated to either hand pumps or a machine operated pump that needed a constant supply of gas. But now with solar powered pumps, farmers can use, constant water pressure systems to constantly pump water out to their crops, regardless of, how many people they have at hand. The Iron Giraffe is actually more of a specific engineering solution. It's actually the newest in the arsenal of mobile heavy drilling equipment for water for South Sudan. And it is a monster of a machine that is able to bore through the toughest of dirts that they can get through, making it not only easier to get more wells out there, but to get wells in harder to reach places. And then finally, there are UAVs and satellite imaging. Especially in some of these lower income and third world countries, maps are either few and far between or aren't really that updated. And with a lack of infrastructure, it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly where you are. That way, with satellite imaging, it's a lot easier to pinpoint exactly where you need to go and, provide. So in conclusion, more attention needs to be devoted to help build/rebuild the infrastructure of these countries. Only then can our actual engineering solutions take hold and affect the people in need. Finally, Water Equity is another massive company, or not massive company, but massive organization dedicated to supplying water to those. So do your part to help the water flow. If anybody has any questions, here are my references. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question.
What's up?
So, you presented a lot of solutions to how to help water. As far as drilling wells go, is it just these organizations will just drill it and leave, or will they come back for upkeep?
Yes. So a lot of these organizations, not only do when they implement the pumps, they select 2 individuals to help not only install the pump, but they educate them to maintain the pump over time, as well as, come back and check on the pumps every few months to years, et cetera. Not only does that actually help maintain the pumps, but it also promotes education and it gets passed down throughout the village, which is another monumental thing of worldwide education. But yes, they do actually come back, and they're totally non-for-profit, so they don't charge anything whatsoever. Cool. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, how do I end the recording?